Hi everyone, welcome to my channel where I share with you the best insights from the most influential books on business, leadership, and personal development. In today's video, I'm going to summarize the main ideas from the book, The Culture Map, by Erin Meyer, a professor of cross-cultural management at INSEAD and a leading expert on global teamwork. The Culture Map is a practical and insightful guide that helps you navigate the invisible boundaries of global business. It introduces an 8-scale model that helps you analyze the cultural differences between countries and regions and decode how they impact your international collaborations. By understanding where your culture and your counterparts' cultures are on each scale, you can avoid misunderstandings, adapt your behavior, and achieve better outcomes in your cross-cultural interactions. So if you are ready to improve your cross-cultural skills and become a global leader, keep watching this video and learn from the Culture Map by Erin Meyer. Communicating. The first scale is communicating, which measures how explicitly or implicitly people convey their messages. Explicit communicators tend to be clear, direct, and specific. They say what they mean and mean what they say. Implicit communicators tend to be vague, indirect, and ambiguous. They rely on context, tone, and body language to convey their meaning. For example, Americans are more explicit than Japanese. When an American says, yes, it usually means, I agree. When a Japanese says, yes, it could mean, I hear you, I understand, or, maybe. This can lead to confusion and frustration when they work together. To communicate effectively across cultures, you need to adjust your level of explicitness according to your audience. If you are more explicit than them, you need to tone down your directness and pay attention to the subtle cues. If you are more implicit than them, you need to be more specific and check for understanding. Evaluating. The second scale is evaluating, which measures how people give feedback and criticism. Positive feedback tends to be encouraging, supportive, and motivating. Negative feedback tends to be constructive, honest, and corrective. Some cultures prefer to give more positive feedback than negative feedback, while others prefer the opposite. For example, Americans tend to give more positive feedback than Germans. Americans often use the sandwich technique, which is to wrap negative feedback between two slices of positive feedback. Germans tend to give more negative feedback than positive feedback. They believe that criticism is helpful and praise is unnecessary. To evaluate effectively across cultures, you need to adjust your ratio of positive to negative feedback according to your audience. If you give more positive feedback than them, you need to be more direct and specific about what needs improvement. If you give more negative feedback than them, you need to be more polite and respectful about what works well. Persuading. The third scale is persuading, which measures how people use logic and emotion to convince others. Deductive reasoning starts with a general principle or theory and then applies it to a specific case or example. Inductive reasoning starts with a specific case or example and then derives a general principle or theory from it. For example, French people tend to use deductive reasoning more than Americans. French people like to start with a big idea or concept and then show how it applies to a particular situation. Americans tend to use inductive reasoning more than French people. Americans like to start with facts or data and then build up a conclusion or recommendation. To persuade effectively across cultures, you need to adjust your style of reasoning according to your audience. If you use more deductive reasoning than them, you need to provide more evidence or examples to support your argument. If you use more inductive reasoning than them, you need to provide more context or background to explain your argument. Leading. The fourth scale is leading, which measures how people relate to authority and hierarchy. Egalitarian cultures tend to value equality, autonomy, and participation. They believe that everyone has a voice and a say in decision-making. Hierarchical cultures tend to value order, status, and direction. They believe that leaders have the power and responsibility to make decisions. For example, Scandinavians are more egalitarian than Chinese. Scandinavians think that the best boss is just one of them who facilitates consensus and collaboration. Chinese think that the best boss is a benevolent, strong person who commands respect and obedience. To lead effectively across cultures, you need to adjust your level of hierarchy according to your audience. If you are more egalitarian than them, you need to show more authority and assertiveness when making decisions. If you are more hierarchical than them, you need to show more humility and inclusiveness when making decisions. Deciding. The fifth scale is deciding, which measures how people make decisions and reach consensus. Consensual cultures tend to involve everyone in the decision-making process and seek agreement from all parties. They believe that decisions are more effective and sustainable when everyone is on board. Top-down cultures tend to delegate the decision-making power to a few individuals or leaders. They believe that decisions are more efficient and timely when someone takes charge. For example, Japanese are more consensual than Americans. Japanese like to have long and thorough discussions before making a decision. They use a technique called nemawashi, which means to lay the groundwork or build consensus in advance. Americans are more top-down than Japanese. Americans like to have short and decisive meetings where someone makes a decision. They use a technique called decide and announce, which means to make a decision and then inform others. To decide effectively across cultures, you need to adjust your mode of decision-making according to your audience. If you are more consensual than them, you need to be more decisive and clear about who makes the final call. If you are more top-down than them, you need to be more consultative and open about how you make the call. Trusting. The sixth scale is trusting, which measures how people build trust and rapport. Cognitive trust is based on the confidence that someone is reliable, competent, and professional. It is built through work performance and track record. Affective trust is based on the feeling that someone is caring, friendly, and personal. It is built through social interactions and emotional bonds. For example, Americans tend to rely more on cognitive trust than Chinese. Americans trust someone who delivers results and meets expectations. They don't need to know someone personally or socially to work with them. Chinese tend to rely more on affective trust than Americans. Chinese trust someone who shows interest and respect for their personal lives and values. They need to know someone personally or socially before working with them. To trust effectively across cultures, you need to adjust your type of trust according to your audience. If you rely more on cognitive trust than them, you need to show more interest and empathy for their personal situations and feelings. If you rely more on affective trust than them, you need to show more competence and professionalism in your work performance and behavior. Disagreeing. The seventh scale is disagreeing, which measures how people express disagreement and handle conflict. Confrontational cultures tend to view disagreement as positive and constructive. They believe that conflict stimulates innovation and creativity. Avoidant cultures tend to view disagreement as negative and destructive. They believe that conflict undermines harmony and stability. For example, Israelis are more confrontational than Japanese. Israelis like to debate openly and passionately about different opinions and perspectives. They use a technique called dugri, which means to speak directly or bluntly. Japanese are more avoidant than Israelis. Japanese like to avoid open confrontation and preserve face for everyone involved. They use a technique called harage, which means to communicate indirectly or subtly. To disagree effectively across cultures, you need to adjust your level of confrontation according to your audience. If you are more confrontational than them, you need to be more respectful and diplomatic when expressing your views. If you are more avoidant than them, you need to be more candid and assertive when expressing your views. Scheduling. The eighth and final scale is scheduling, which measures how people manage time and deadlines. Linear time cultures tend to view time as sequential, fixed, and scarce. They believe that being punctual, organized, and efficient is important for success. Flexible time cultures tend to view time as fluid, adaptable, and abundant. They believe that being adaptable, spontaneous, and relaxed is important for success. For example, Germans are more linear time than Brazilians. Germans like to plan ahead, stick to the schedule, and meet the deadlines. They use a technique called Pünktlichkeit, which means punctuality or timeliness. Brazilians are more flexible time than Germans. Brazilians like to improvise, change the schedule, and extend the deadlines. They use a technique called jeitinho, which means finding a way or a workaround. To schedule effectively across cultures, you need to adjust your attitude towards time according to your audience. If you are more linear time than them, you need to be more flexible and tolerant when dealing with delays or changes. If you are more flexible time than them, you need to be more punctual and reliable when dealing with appointments or commitments. So these are the 8 scales of the culture map by Erin Meyer that can help you understand and navigate cultural differences in business and beyond. I hope you enjoyed this video summary of the book and learned something valuable from it. If you did, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. See you in other book reviews and summaries. Thank you for watching.